All right, welcome to our lecture on geopolitical theories, and this time both the slides and the lecture are by me. I'm your host for the lecture, of course, Miss Gall. So let's go ahead and get started. So a few quick things we want to talk about before we actually dig into the theories in the handout you have in front of you. So first of all, the general definition of geopolitics and a little bit of kind of some information about it, right? So geopolitics is that application of geographic theories and methods of analysis to politics on the global level. Okay, so we're using geography as a lens with which to view politics and political actions worldwide. Okay, historically, this has been used to explain why some countries grow and others fail to thrive. Okay, but then also it becomes moves into some of the more competitive piece and how we're competing against each other. The name geopolitics and the idea of geopolitical theories actually kind of gets a bad name after they're used to justify Hitler's expansion in World War II. So they kind of go away for a while in the 50s and 60s, kind of go underground. And then you start to see a lot more of that geopolitical thinking rising up in the 1970s and beyond. It's not to say that the theories aren't there, just that they're not being labeled as such. These days, instead of using the term geopolitics, which can be a little bit loaded, the name we use is political geography. Okay, so go ahead, pull your hand out in front of you, and we're going to basically we're going to more or less go in the order that they are in the handout. Okay, and as we go, what I want you to do is fill in your maps on your handout so that you can actually see what we're talking about when you go to review your notes. Okay, so organic theory basically holds that countries are like organisms, and organisms grow and expand to survive, right? So countries are like living organisms, and they need to expand in order to get larger and to have enough land for their people. Remember, a lot of this is coming out of the late 1800s, this geopolitical thinking, and what's going on during the late 1800s. Oh, that's right. Baby boom in much of the world, right? Populations are growing hugely. So a great example of this would be Adolf Hitler's decision to expand Germany. Really, he expands eastward and westward, but in particular, he expands significantly further eastward in order to allow the growing, that's what that word burgeoning means, the growing German population to have enough land to really be able to support themselves. Okay, so this is the theory and the justification that gives geopolitics its bad name that I was talking about with the last slide. And the theorist that we most commonly associate this with is Friedrich Ratzel. So on your maps on your handout, what I want you to do is color in Germany, so zero in kind of a little bit on Europe on your map, and then find kind of roughly the middle of Europe, and that's Germany. Okay, and color that in and draw some arrows indicating that they're expanding outward, like that living organism that's trying to take over new land, really from, according to Hitler, less desirable people. And his theory of is was because he's dead now, that those less desirable people would either be killed or enslaved in order to make way for the German people and the German population. After World War II, and with the birth of the Cold War, we start to see the development of what are called Heartland and Rimland theories. Okay, and the Heartland theory, which is should be the page you have in front of you now, okay, is this basic idea that there's kind of this heart of the world there's kind of this, sorry, let me start over again. There's this world island, okay, which is basically encompasses, in particular, Europe and Asia, but because the way Africa is also goes around Africa, okay? And that in order to control the world island, which was the most kind of influential piece, then what you need to do is control what's called the heartland. And the heartland is that red up there, okay? So what's going on here is that the argument is the era of sea power is really over, okay? In order to have power, in order to have control, you need to control the land. Specifically, you need to control Eurasia. Okay, and there's a few key ideas in place here. Again, that Eurasia is a world island. Okay, that in order to establish control over the world island, you have to control Eastern Europe, really all the way into much of China. Okay, this is the heartland that gives the theory its name. And that controlling the world island is necessary to dominating the world. So, great example of this in the aftermath of World War II is Russia's attempts under Joseph Stalin to consolidate control over Eastern Europe and create a series of buffer states that are going to protect Russia and protect that heartland from attack, right? And the theorist we most commonly associate with the heartland theory is Halford Mackinder. Go ahead and skip the domino theory page for the moment on your handout and flip to the RIMLAND page, because heartland and RIMLAND really go together. And the domino theory kind of helps explain that middle piece of how we get to the heartland theory. But because we've got the slide here that does a nice job of showing both, we're going to go ahead and talk about RIMLAND first. So the RIMLAND theory holds that if you can contain and surround the heartland, then you'll be able to prevent its expansion. Okay, and if you can do that, if you can control that RIMLAND, then you can prevent the emergence of a major world power. Okay, so what this comes out of is the Cold War, and the Cold War, which you're going to watch a video about later today, is really a fight between capitalism and communism, or communism and democracy, sorry. Okay, and it takes a lot of the actual fighting in the Cold War takes place in that RIMLAND kind of area, both the actual and the metaphorical fighting, because there's a lot of battles of words and economic battles and things like that that go on as well. Okay, so on this map, what you want to do, so the previous map you had the heartland. On this map, I want you to do the heartland and add the RIMLAND, okay, to it. And when you're thinking about this, what I want you to remember is that there's actual battles that go on for control of this RIMLAND. So there's actual battles in places like Korea, which is still to this day split along the lines that were developed during the Cold War, right? During Vietnam, which ultimately was started or got split into two and then was ultimately reunited. So there's a lot of battles that go on, and we could talk about other examples, but we'll talk about those when we talk about the domino theory. Okay, and the major theorist that we associate with this one is a gentleman named Nicholas Spykman, S-P-Y-K-M-A-N, Spykman. So go ahead, flip back to the page on domino theory. Okay, and domino theory is really pretty simple. Domino theory holds that countries are kind of like dominoes that are set up on a table in a pattern. And if you've ever done this, you'll be able to envision what I'm talking about really easily. And basically what it is, remember, this is coming out of a world where it's capitalism versus communism. It's a fight to the death. It's us or them. Okay, and you're either with us or you're against us. And it's very much in terms of the way the leaders are thinking, in terms of their rhetoric and all of that kind of stuff. It's very much an us versus them mentality. Okay, so the way domino theory holds is that if one country in an area falls to communism, then nearby countries will also fall to communism until the entire world has fallen or is communist, right? So it's kind of like dominoes that are set up on a table and knocked over, and that's what I like about this particular graphic, right? So the democratic countries have to try and protect themselves, protect their lands from becoming communist as a form of self-defense. And the way the graphic here works, right, it doesn't start with the original communist country, which is Russia, because it's really the US and Russia that are kind of battling for this dominance or for this control. But if you think about and envision your world map, and you can kind of draw this in on your map on your handout, so Russia falls, and then the country right next to it, one of the countries right next to it is China, and then China falls, and we're focused on Asia, so we're going to ignore what's going on in Eastern Europe for right now. So China is right next to Russia and Asia, and so China falls, and then the theory is if we let Korea fall, and the northern part of Korea does ultimately become communist and remains a communist dictatorship to this day, right, then on down the list, right? Vietnam falls, Vietnam does ultimately become communist. Laos falls, Laos ultimately becomes communist. Cambodia falls and becomes communist for a while. They're technically no longer so. Thailand, Malaysia, and on down the line, right? So it's literally like those dominoes falling down on the table with the setup. So some examples that we could talk about, and really the US uses the domino theory, by the way, as a way of justifying its involvement overseas. So US involvement in countries like Korea, Vietnam, Greece, where essentially what we do is get involved in civil wars, providing support and backup to the side that either flat out agrees with us or appears to agree with us, because domino theory is also used to prop up a lot of people who pay lip service to US belief systems and who ultimately are very anti-democratic. So the major theorist that we associate with domino theory is a gentleman named George Kennan. Okay. And let me go through and do a little bit of recap, because really what we've been talking about is geopolitical theories from the 20th century. So we started out with the earliest theory, which is organic theory. And again, organic theory that countries are like organisms. They need to spread out their habitat in order to survive. And then we went on and we talked about the heartland theory and how whoever controls the heartland, which is kind of that major area, major agricultural area in Eastern Europe into Asia, will control the world, right? And then from that, we talked about the RIMLAND theory, which is that if you could develop or build up a RIMLAND around the heartland, then you'd be able to contain it and ultimately prevent it from spreading outwards. And in this case, we're going to read heartland as kind of a synonymous for communism. And then to loop back, what we ended with was the domino theory, which is really used in a lot of ways to explain or justify a lot of the actions that are taken under that RIMLAND theory. Okay, and the domino theory is that if one country in an area falls to communism, then all the other countries around them will fall too, and this falling will expand until ultimately the whole world is communism. Right, so our dominoes on the page here are all Asian, but we could easily trace similar sorts of dominoes in Eastern Europe. We can talk about Poland, we could talk about some of the republics, now former republics of the USSR, that form this kind of skirt between the Russian heartland and the rest of Europe. And the edge of that ultimately is called the Iron Curtain, which is a phrase stolen from Winston Churchill that describes that split between the democratic West Europe and the communist Eastern Europe. So if you have any questions, by all means, please feel free to bring them into me, and I'd be delighted to answer your questions or address your concerns. And I will see you the next time we meet.